Hello, Truth Warriors, and welcome back to the Atlantic Underground. With Canada and other countries making laws to strip individual freedoms and rights of its citizens, it's important that everyone remains vigilant to the bills they are putting forward and what they actually really mean. Today, we are talking to an expert lawyer, barrister, and activist for the preservation of freedoms. She has been behind some big cases, such as the Grandview case, and also represented the family of the first nurse to die of SARS. She is a writer and has 24 years of experience under her belt. But today we're going to be talking about what's going on in the world, as well as Bill C293 and how it's being pushed through. Hello, Lisa Miron. How are you today?
Hi, hi everybody. I'm really good. I'm really glad to be speaking to people around the world because really this is kind of a world assault on freedoms, right? We're seeing this around the world. It's the same story, it's the same garbage, and we need the same tools to push back. And so I'm hoping to give you guys some information about what's going on in Canada and how what's going on internationally that really matters here.
That's it.
So yeah.
Everyone around the world, unfortunately, at the moment has the very same noose around its neck from the very same people. Now, who allowed the World Health Organization to actually have power over us?
They anointed themselves in one way, but there is a source document that really is important for people to know. A lot of discussion has been about the pandemic treaty and about the international health regulations amendments. But I decided that I would look at the first international health regulations before they were amended. And what I found resonated with me because I was looking for it. I had a hunch that public health, the people who get in front of us, are not our countries, that they belong or they're, directly controlled by the WHO. So
Yeah.
in 2005, the international health regulations required that each country set up a national focal point in their country, which is essentially a satellite office of the WHO, right? So information has to go both ways. And over those 19 years, Chris, you can imagine that there's been an embedding of the WHO into that architecture of their satellite office. And if I'm allowed to share screen, when I found
Yeah.
Canada's, it's going to blow your mind where it's located. So here we are.
Yeah. I'm not sure anything surprises me with Canada after the past 4 or 5 years and what we've seen, but I think people are going to slowly realize that they haven't taken the foot off the gas pedal and it's still full steam ahead.
It's full steam ahead, and we have to realize we are the political actors. The psyop is that we're not. The psyop is that they are. We are the political actors. So the National International Health Focal Points Guide, I reviewed all of it, and I said, okay, well, where's Canada's national focal point? You'd think it'd be in Canada. It's in Washington, D.C., and the address is 525 23rd Street in Northwest Washington, D.C. And the website for our national focal point is www.payho.org /can. Pan American Health Organization. They're known as Pan American Health Organization slash World Health Organization. So Washington, D.C. is like a little control knob for Canada's national focal point. And so what are I guess this is one, two, five organizations that report into this national focal point. So, I did a master's in law and conflict of interest. Oh, if they're not telling us that
Yeah.
they've been embedded in our institutions for 19 years, that's a conflict of interest. How deep are the WHO tentacles into this organization if for 19 years they've been the satellite office of the WHO, the NFP? So it's the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Oh, that chicken has the flu. Call the herd. Canadian Institution of Health Research. Oh, what are we going to fund? What's true in science these days? Health Canada. Okay, doctors, this is how you treat the following diseases. Here's your memos. Trust us. This is big. Patented Medicine Prices Review Board. Do you wonder how much we're going to pay for those vaccines, right? And then most egregious, the Public Health Agency of Canada. They're not independent. They're the WHOs. They're right organized through PAHO in Washington, D.C. So when we see our public health officials, we're seeing the WHO PAHO. So what they like to do is, in the EU, right, they want to regionalize everything
Yeah.
eventually to establish the global hierarchy. So here we are, and sucker punch, but it also resonates, doesn't it? When
I
we were
think,
listening to everybody, it was them.
yeah. I think what bothers me the most about that as well, not only that it is outside of Canada, it's the fact that it's in Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. is a principality of its own, which means it is not subject to the laws of the United States. So, we've got these powerhouses of the City of London, the Vatican, and Washington, D.C., the three places in the world that are not subject to its country's laws. And here we are having everything here piled into a place in the US that is not subject to its country's laws, which means if they're operating out of there, they're almost untouchable by the legal system that people are expecting to uphold such laws in there. Would that be a concern for a lot of people, do you think?
That would be a concern, but I think the real blatant concern is that when we hear all these mandates coming through, these recommendations, these stay-at-home orders, whatever, and we think it's our health agencies here. It's not. And so, you know, if there is the conflict of interest that's there, but possibly also the conflict of interest that Gavi and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is funding, the WHO, the CCP is appointing, Tedros was President Xi's man. So we have really an untenable hostile organization, hostile to the nation state, right? They really are hostile to the nation state,
Yeah.
embedded in our own country's agencies. Most people don't understand that. And so, they think your country has its best interest, right? When we try to wake up the sheep, they're listening, but oh, here's my betters talking to me, whatever. But that's the concern, I think, that has the ability to take the wool off of everybody's hat. Like, these agencies have been working as the national focal point of the WHO since 2005 international health regulations mandate for NFP. So how deep are those tentacles? So who's talking to you? And that's true for every nation that I found around the world. So I want that to be the context, because when we look at the bill that I'm taking you to, which I describe as a coup,
Yeah.
two parts of the NFP, Health Canada, the Minister of Health drafts the plan, okay? And they appoint someone from the Public Health Agency of Canada. So they're taking these broad sweeping powers, which I'll take your viewers through, and anointing somebody as the top dog, dictator, however he wants to be called, from public, or she, from Public Health Canada. So it's Health Canada and Public Health Canada running the show in this bill. And that's why I wanted to stop here.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to stop here first.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now we're seeing a massive totalitarian overreach in Bill C293. Can you please talk us through how bad this is if it actually does get approved? I mean, it's already past its first stage now, and it's obviously going through to a second vote. But give us an outline of what we're looking at here, because most people aren't even aware that this bill exists, let alone the content of what's involved with it.
It's a tight bill that it's amazing how much damage the words in it can cause. So first of all, it delves into a One Health approach in the preamble. And then in section 2, it says it must have that approach. And in section 3, it details further, you have to do the One Health approach. And One Health is the selling feature is, hey, we're going to have the same health approach all around the world. No. One Health means that it is a multi-sectoral, so any sector they want,
Yeah.
multidisciplinary, any discipline they want, right? And then approach dealing with that focuses. And the word focus has got to be one of those safe and effective words, because I really don't understand it. That focuses on uh, animal, human, plant, ecosystem health. So everything in God's green earth
Yeah.
that right? Tell me what's not there. And then your government interface known as the welfare interface. So first of all, it's the grant of power over anything they choose it to be when they choose it to be. So that's the first egregious power. And then they get to do this plan, and they get to update it every 3 years. And it can deal with anything that may contribute to a risk of a pandemic. So it's so tenuous, and there's nothing that's defined. So risk, it doesn't have to be a material risk. It doesn't have to be temporarily, it doesn't have to happen in the next 20,000 years. It's if they devise that it's any kind of risk, it can be a risk, and pandemic's not defined.
Yeah.
So they don't limit anything. And I would love to take you through the actual provisions that worry me most, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll share screen.
Yeah. Do we know as
Yeah.
well which politicians passed the bill in the House of Commons? Is that public knowledge?
Yeah. So in the House of Commons, by the way, this was a backbencher bill. Okay. It was a private member's bill. And private members' bill are not um usually passed. But in this case, it was. The Conservatives did not vote yes on this, but our NDP did, right? That's Jagmeet Singh, who thinks he wants to be the next WEF, young global leader, prime minister of Canada, and he wants to break off from Justin Trudeau, but not trigger an election. So he doesn't want to vote no confidence. He wants to. I'm not supporting him, right? Because this is the longest, most hated minority government in Canadian history. People are saying he's the worst prime minister ever, and clearly he's got that hands down. I'll give that to him every day of the week and twice on Sundays. But so he's got that. So the Bloc voted against it, but I wonder how much of a show this is, because Bloc is now stepping out to support the Trudeau government, and we'll see how that shakes down. Danielle Smith has said, hey, right, you're a separatist party. How are you supporting, the Trudeau government? So this was proposed in 2022 in October, and by Erskine Smith out of the Beaches in Toronto area. And I guess he's a vegan. Imagine that when you see these provisions. And he, at the time, I was writing all MPs about the treaty. And his office sent me a gaslighting email that says I should watch something on conspiracy theories, while he was domesticating WHO control through this bill. So, right? Right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Talk about a red rag to a bull there. That probably got you fired up and more determined to take this down.
I don't know what, I saw that I have a Substack, lawyerlisa.substack.com, and I'd written about it, and it wasn't getting the traction. I didn't. So I said, I'm going to have to get out in front of this. And I called up James Roguski, and I said, listen, this is the WHO full coup takeover of our country. And the rest is history, because then, he started setting me up to get my message out. And so that's where we're at.
And the
It's
thing is,
called
yeah, I
yeah.
was going to say if this is going on in Canada, and obviously with the steps that the World Health Organization are taking to take over control of the health sector of every country, there must be bills in other countries around the world that are similarly mirroring what we're seeing here as well.
Yeah, any of your viewers across the world, you should, I hope, Chris, when you air this, that you have all my links.
Yeah.
Um, you have all my links, and you take these links, and then you open up the language and you use AI to find them, because they can't help themselves.
Yeah.
They can't help themselves. Once you know how to read them, you find them. You can just hunt them down. And by that, I mean their language.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you
Then
can
maybe,
find them.
maybe we'll get to the real hunting down when they're not listening.
Uh, right. So, and then it's talks about a sustained collaboration. So an all the time collaboration, right? So then here's your excuse to get in all, various ministers, whatever minister they say they tap is appropriate, and all levels of government and our indigenous communities. And I know like our First Nations, I don't know if they want to be called indigenous community where indigenous is also not defined.
Yeah.
Because when indigenous is not defined in this bill, then if you're doing any kind of changes to treaties, to land, to fishing rights, or what have you, who's getting them?
Yeah.
Right? How do the globalists define indigenous communities, and is it just going to be a tap of themselves? So when you see the infiltration, it's everywhere. And what I would like to say is where they don't limit themselves, then there's no limit, right? You read I've negotiated contracts with massive parties, and when acting for the little guy, and I've always reined in the language to have the minimalist interpretation, unless I want a large interpretation, unless I want a lot of powers.
Yeah.
And so you're going to see this. So this, prevent the risk of, okay, risk, not defined, like I said, that could lead to pandemics, right? Not defined.
Yeah.
And then so they have to do the mitigation strategies, and you're going to be horrified on what level of power. And when I'm just going down to the bottom. So as we go through all the powers and what they're getting involved in, they're also going to appoint the national coordinator. So the Minister of Health, the WHO, controlled satellite office, Ministry of Health or Health Canada is going to appoint from the Public Agency of Canada. And on top of everything else, they're going to delegate to this coordinator from a top-down approach, right? That doesn't sound like democracy. They're going to send that to coordinator additional powers, additional duties,
Yeah.
additional functions that aren't listed, that aren't defined. The only limit on that is that the minister considers it appropriate. So there again, there's that broad grant of power
Yeah.
to two organizations that are controlled by the WHO, or so embedded as, tell me they're not.
It also seems that it's deliberately loosely worded so they can interpret it as and when they see fit in any manner that they wish.
100%. So we've seen risk isn't defined, and pandemics not defined, contribute to loosey-goosey but massive powers,
Yeah.
right? How it gets initiated, loosey-goosey, what they get, massive powers. And they get to identify the key drivers of pandemic risk. And it's if you've ever been a Canadian, it's Canadians who are domestic and abroad. So what a ridiculous, omnipotent grant of jurisdiction. Okay, so, well, right, I don't normally see Canadian regulators up until, the Justin Trudeau thinking that they have omnipotent jurisdiction, right? So
Yeah.
who thinks they have omnipotent jurisdiction? WHO, right? Gavi, Bill and Melinda Gates, this crew of globalists, the UN, they think they have omnipotent jurisdiction. That's just another hint. And so that's a jurisdictional issue. But if there's any jurisdictional issue on this, because we're going to see resources in agriculture, we're going to see health. If it's a provincial jurisdiction under our Constitution, well, let's look at this provision. They get sustained collaboration between the Minister of Health and provincial governments and Indigenous communities, Indigenous not defined, in the development of the plan to align approaches. So again, they're going to align the approach with this vision of one health. They get everything.
Yeah.
And address jurisdictional challenges. So if there's a, territorial jurisdiction, we'll address it. If there's a provincial jurisdiction over resources, they're going to try to address it. What about our charter rights and us going to court or trying to say the legislative or executive branch have exceeded their jurisdiction? Are they going to address the jurisdiction of the court? Is that a worry? It's just so broadly worded, right?
Yeah,
I see omnipotence here, the desire for total omnipotence on the checks and balances that we would have.
yeah. It makes you wonder as well if, this would be opened up in a similar manner that they did with the likes of the Emergency Measures Act. And then they feel that they have carte blanche to do whatever they want under that Measures Act. And it makes me wonder under which umbrella they would use this in order to try and have the full extent of its powers used against the people, because it appears that they've done it once before, and I'm sure they'd have no problem doing it once more or many times
Yeah.
again.
Now imagine what they did with us without this act. You just
Yeah,
let that sit with you, right? What did they do to us without this act? And like you said, the way the charter is set up, section 1 of our charter allows for certain limitations that are, quote, reasonable. Well, this is going to work hand in glove with the Declaration of Pandemic Health international concern, whatever it comes with, but it's spelled or it sounds like fake, right? It sounds like fake. So the WHO declares it's emergency, and then so are we going to be able then to run to court to say, look, I don't want to be hauled off to quarantine or whatever else. Like, I don't want this. It's infringing on my rights.
yeah,
So yeah, the way the setup is, and it's just, you play chess or as a lawyer over 24 years, you just get to start thinking how your opponent thinks, because that's the only way you win a case
yeah,
is you got to anticipate their arguments. You got to anticipate their moves. So of course, you're right. They're going to declare the pandemic of internet, the fake, and then invoke the powers. And so that's why I always feel like when people say, well, we'll just wait till the next election. No, we have to bring the people power now.
yeah.
It's not wait till the next election. It's time to make noise.
That's it, because
Um,
this is most likely going to be put into place before the next election, and then will allow whoever is selected into power to continue pushing this forward. Because we hear that certain people are not involved with the World Economic Forum and the Young Global Leaders program, but those very people that might likely be voted in as the next Prime Minister of Canada are surrounded within their own advisory team, and everybody that works alongside them, they're young global leaders. So I find it very hard to believe that the front runner, who is distancing himself from this, is not connected inadvertently with the World Economic Forum, and certainly these agendas that are pushing forward with the likes of the World Health Organization here.
well, you know what? They have their agendas. They may have their people. I've got to tell you the recent win we had in Toronto. Toronto Public Health wanted to bring in decriminalizing of hard drugs. And it was going to have no lower age limit, right? So, your 4-year-old could do math at school, and, the teachers wouldn't be able to stop it. There was going to be, no way to get it out. There was going to be no limit on the amount you could carry. So then trafficking was all of a sudden also decriminalized, right? So you could have trafficking near schools. It's just a depopulation pipeline, right? We'll go there, and we have euthanasia. Canada's really big on euthanasia. And the people spoke, and they didn't stop contacting their politicians, and they spoke and they spoke and they spoke and they spoke, and the media spoke, and we stopped it.
Yeah.
And and we have been psyoped for so long. That's the whole point of telling us our government is shameful. We should hate our history. We should topple our statues. All of that. If they weren't afraid of the government having morality in its institutions again,
Yeah.
they wouldn't take the time. So you better believe your personal power is the one thing they're afraid of. And when we bring it, when we bring it, it will change everything, 100%. I
Yeah.
know that in my heart.
I mean,
And
should
it,
people, yeah,
yeah.
should people who are being misrepresented by the local MLAs go and express their disdain and let them know that they will not be electing them again? Is that powerful enough, or does it need to go higher up the ladder?
So I have a, I have a, designated this one click, drafted a letter. You put in your name and your email and your address, and it immediately tells the Senate why you want them to vote no on it. It goes to MLAs, it goes to premiers, based on your jurisdiction, and you can, change the letter at the front to make it yours. Um, and we're having a resounding amount of Canadians. They're stepping up. They're
Yeah.
stepping up. It's like they heard the call. They're stepping up. And there's going to be protests as well. But let's go back to the bill so your viewers fully understand what Canada's tyrannical government is trying to do with this. When we identify the key drivers of pandemic risk, I thought I would pop that as a search term, right? Just into Google, because Google will tell me what they want me to think. And so I will go to what Google wants me to think. And first result was the Harvard T. Chan School of Public Health. Okay. And they're telling me what my key drivers of pandemic risk. And that's what I put my search term in. And so here it is. So why, bugs is always coming up. And as the planet heats up, and remember, this is Harvard, okay? The smartest people in the world apparently are Harvard, the big brains.
Well, yeah.
Animals, this is the tenuous connection to, this is how they think, okay? This is their research that they get to identify. As the planet heats up, animals, big and small, on land and sea are headed to the poles. As we speak, my friend, to get out of the heat. That means animals are coming into contact with other animals they normally wouldn't. And that creates the opportunity for pathogens to get into new hosts,
That's
right?
that's quite amusing, really, because the studies show that there has never been um, pathogen transfer between species. And I think there's enough evidence out there now for people to research to show that that statement there is slightly flawed.
Slightly. And it's such circular logic, right? So, oh my God. So, and like my big joke on this is since I've read this is always like, do you know where you're going? Are you lost? Is your GPS not working? Everybody look outside, see where the animals are running. Then you'll know due north, right? Like, and then the next, this is them going after land, expropriation, agriculture as a whole. So you're gonna see that again, that they're saying that when agriculture is the leading cause of deforestation. I'm going to take you right to the bill where that's in there. Many of the root causes of climate change also increase the risk of pandemics, right? Are there going to be climate lockdowns? Are you going to have 15-minute cities because of climate change, because of the WHO, because of this totalitarian bill that must be in your country? Deforestation, which occurs mostly for agriculture purposes, is the largest cause of habitat loss worldwide. So agriculture, bad. Deforestation, bad because climate change, because pandemics. Do you
Yeah.
follow all that? Right?
And
So loss,
people
right?
need to remember as well who the biggest buyer of farmland is currently, certainly in the US. But when it's not Bill Gates buying up the farmland, it is the monopolies that hold these whole corporations out there, the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard are buying up huge corporations and agricultural companies and becoming the majority shareholders. And this is something that's just literally taking the ability of people that have farms to contribute to local communities with foods. And, we had a farm in Canada ourselves. We had a beautiful 40-acre organic farm. we sold it up and moved out of Canada because the writing was on the wall 4 or 5 years ago that we could clearly see. We knew what was coming down the pipeline.
So this is their pipeline, this is their vision, but we have to remember that everybody who is working for BlackRock is a person with a family, with a heart, with a conscience. And everybody who works for Vanguard is a person with a heart, with a conscience. And everybody in pharma is a person with a heart, with a conscience that we can reach. And they have to love living in their communities too, right? I think when they're given these small tasks or whatever their job is and this big salary, if they're not putting the total plan together, they don't know where it's headed. But once you wake those people up too, like you got to say, you never know where your Davids are and how they're going to take down your Goliaths. You don't know. You never
Yeah.
met me, right? Like who knows? Everybody has a time and place for the path that we're on. And the biggest thing that we give to everybody is hope. And if we stop doing that, then no action takes place. So, but yeah, this is their laughable connection. And then the animals. So you got germs going to animals. Animals have to migrate because animals lost habitat, because uh, because of agriculture, because deforestation, because climate change, because of risk of pandemics, aka all that means is you eating, right?
And there's a lot of buzzwords in there that people fear these buzzwords, but also when you bring reports from organizations that have been well respected as being the pinnacle, like Harvard and other centers that are supposed to be the best education in the world, when they bring reports like this forward, it appears that the majority of people out there just seem to accept what's being said because they think that it's people who are far, higher intelligence than what they are making the decisions for them, and that's right. And I think people really need to get out of that mindset and start thinking for themselves.
You know who's not deferring to them is the working class. Working class says that's ridiculous. That's a bunch of leaps of logic that none of them are held together. It's like playing hopscotch a mile apart. Like it just doesn't tie together. And the working class is figuring that out. And it's the people who are taught to stand down to power because I won't say mean things about them, but that is sometimes people who are highly educated because maybe our education systems are teaching people not to think and to defer to the power systems. So they get to identify the key drivers of pandemic risk. They get to do that. Um, and they get to do training programs, including collaborative activities with other levels of government, whoever they want, indigenous communities and relevant agencies. So they get in there, then they get to train them, right? So they put their people in and they train them. And I've got to say this relevant agencies thing is pretty creepy because New Zealand, their pandemic plan has the idea that their police, which is a police agency, civil authority agency, can assist the chief medical officer of health, or their employees with quarantining people, right? Places, so whole towns, vessels, cars, transportation, train, things, right? Animals, your pets. And use force if necessary.
Yeah.
So this is that training thing, and we're seeing all kinds of training right now coming out. Training for paramedics, for mass death, training for firefighters to vaccinate you, training that those training programs are being held at conferences, what have you. So this idea of training relevant agencies, like I'm thinking that this is a 2025 launch, and so
Yeah.
the people around the world are really going to have to step up to say no now,
But
step
no,
up to say no, because
I
this
was
is
going to
where it's
say,
at.
I was going to say as well before we move on from talking about the quarantines and stuff. We saw quarantine camps in China and different parts of the world. I heard and saw information about possible quarantine camps in Canada and different areas around Europe. Um, these things have not been taken down and dismantled. They're almost sitting there like they use the pandemic as some kind of a training exercise, like an Event 201 exercise in preparation for something bigger. it appears that what they're doing here is pushing this even further. I mean, would the pushing of a bill like this suggest that they have plans to bring about another pandemic in the usual Hegelian dialectic way of problem, reaction, solution? And would something
Mm.
like this mean that they are showing their cards too early in the game?
Well, I don't think they expected us to understand it. It seems to be written a little bit like AI in that they have nudging language.
Mhm.
Um, you know, it, I'll tell you the nudging language when I see it. But if you were reading fast, oh, pandemics are bad. Yeah, we need a plan. Okay, that's great. Let's do it, right? And you're a busy MP and they just swamp you with to-do lists and you don't know how to critically think anymore because you don't. Um, then you're going to miss a little bit of what's going on in this bill. And and so as I'm taking you through that, I'll start to point out the nudging languages,
Yeah.
right? So the next part, right? So they describe the state of research, right? So we saw the Harvard state of research. It's just about animals moving north or agriculture and you eating, causing pandemics. So here's the establishment of interlinking surveillance systems, right? For infectious disease in Canada. So, an infectious disease outside Canada. Oh, okay. So we're already surveilled, uh, you know, incredibly, right? Canada has been bringing forth all kinds of surveillance bills, and we have now the only hiring in Canada is taking place with the government, probably to get on these surveillance jobs. So that's just one of the first surveillance that you're going to see in this bill. And public health, support local public health. So if Public Health Canada is the um, arm of the WHO, we are
Yeah.
to assume that they're going to get your local public health is just part of that arm, really,
Yeah.
and maybe even primary capacity building. Identify preparedness strategies for public health service across Canada, including in respect of protection of vulnerable and marginalized populations. So that's an AI language for you to be cued into thinking it's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But right, but then how they protect vulnerable populations, what we saw was just shut down the entire economy,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't necessarily have to be in our interest. We just, as humans who like people and who defer to our betters, betters, will imbue with that the idea that that is about just protecting marginalized population.
Yeah.
And we've also seen the language here, and I love my rainbow. I have so many rainbow friends, but I'm Christian as well. And I've seen the language that, protection of the rainbow
Yeah.
against the idea of religious freedom. And so if you have beliefs in as a Christian or a Muslim or any other religion that contravenes, that's not acceptable. And that's because they want all authority to go like a true communist to the state. And if you have an ethics or a base that's yours, because of your belief system, that's going to drive your actions, right? You have a conscience that goes to there.
Yeah. And
Um,
the thing is, as well, the last time I saw them enacting the protection of the vulnerable, they were going into care homes and basically murdering the elderly, either with shots that weren't agreeable with them or through the likes of remdesivir and other medications. And we saw a huge spike in deaths, which they then took those numbers and used them to proliferate further fear porn and propaganda through the communities that, accepted what they were saying. They play a real game with this.
yeah, they do. They do. It really, you're right. Those people, we lost them through deliberate mishandling, or what would you say? Deliberate, would you say murder? Would you say murder? I mean, murder applies one person's actions.
Yeah.
When it was more dissemination of this is how we're going to deal with it. It's the idea of, here the Ministry of Health will tell, or Health Canada will tell doctors this is the protocol.
Yeah.
So doctors are like, oh, I have to follow protocol. So is it murder, or is it like following instructions and not being able to question protocol? And doctors who question protocol get hauled up before their professional bodies
Yeah.
and taken out. So then it, other professionals with big mortgages and whatever else, they're like, oh, well, I have to comply with the government protocols or I'm going to lose my license. And so you have this system of power that, by the way, is a house of cards. And once it starts to fall, it's going to fall,
Absolutely.
right?
We
We
need
just don't,
something. We need something
right?
like another Nuremberg trial where people can be held accountable. I mean, what did you think of the laws, mandates, and directives that were implemented during COVID and post-pandemic? I mean, do people have recourse against these authorities that implemented and coerced people into taking something that turned out to not be so safe and effective?
So the laws that are being erected right now are what I would call, yeah, immoral laws, right? So they're putting through a hate law in Canada, which will put you in prison for speech.
Yeah.
All the while that real laws like law and order to protect you against violence and such things are being ignored. So you see emptying the prisons of actual violent crimes, putting in speech crimes, right? So the only crime is really disagreeing with your government, and that's where they're going with that. I started speaking up when my mother was unvaccinated. And, I had some difficulties after my vaccine, and I had so many friends
Yeah.
and relatives. So many, like, it's just like, I can't count them on all my hands and toes, right? And, so, awful. And just awful.
Yeah.
And so when I started seeing the numbers every day that were announced were bed capacity in ICU. And so I don't know, like whether or not we had like 900 in Ontario ICU beds, right? And so that's how they would ratchet it up. And they would say, well, the unvaccinated take more ICU beds than the vaccinated. But they wouldn't tell you the game that they weren't counting you as vaccinated until after your second shot.
Yeah.
So, and yet there were people who were getting those shots and immediately being taking those beds and being counted as unvaccinated, right? But even if you ignored that statistical game, I have a math and science background before I went into law. And so I just took all the numbers of unvaccinated, right, in Ontario, divided them by the ICU bed, and I came up like with an absurd number that at any given point in time, someone who's unvaccinated had a 0.0006% chance of taking up an ICU bed, right? And I said, but notwithstanding that, we're going to 100% punish them, and we're going to say you can't get on a plane and you can't get on a train and you can't buy
Yeah.
food at Walmart and you can't, right? And so I said, if I stop you as a policeman and say you have today a 0.006% chance of speeding, but I'm 100% going to give you a ticket, right? Or hey, Mister over there, you have a 0.0006 chance of raping someone, of becoming a rapist today, and I'm going to 100% send you to jail.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, I can't be the only person who can do statistics and the only person who can analyze the flaws in this mathematics. And certainly people within the government should be able to do that. And that's what just alerted me to that this whole thing is a propaganda fraud,
Yeah.
because you are maligning a percentage of the population and treating them as an untouchable, like they're epilepsy. They have epilepsy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what cued me in to this is a sham. This is
Yeah.
total sham.
That's it. I mean, knowing what's coming down the line, knowing these organizations that are involved, I mean, can we hold governments accountable for carrying out the agendas of unelected groups like the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and the United Nations with sustainable development goals under the guise of Agenda 2030, UNDRIP, and UNESCO, which is a land grab, as well as other non-government organizations. Can the people hold them accountable for doing things that they don't want to happen? And
Chris,
again,
Chris, we will. We
yeah,
will, Chris. We will. We will, Chris. And whether it's you or it's me, right? The people just have to everywhere know what the people bringing this agenda have to become the most irrelevant people. Right now they want to own our military. Right now they want to own our police. Right now they want to own they want to clear out our prisons. They want to take our speakers and put them in there. Like, it looks all hopeless. Right? It looks all hopeless.
yeah,
You put hope in your heart, right? If the the lead up to Nuremberg, do you think any one of those people who were horrifically dying, either, through Stalin starvation programs, the wars, or in the Holocaust, if you had said there's going to be Nuremberg, they wouldn't have believed you. They wouldn't have known the path to it.
yeah,
And so right now, everybody's saying, what's the path to this? How are we getting there? And I can feel the drums coming. I
yeah,
can feel the drums coming,
yeah.
right? Because when we get through this, you're going to see we have to eat bugs to solve for a pandemic, right? We've got to expose this.
Yeah, I
And
mean, the sad part is as well. I mean, well, I was the last person to interview Rainer Fulmick before, because he was wanting to implement the Nuremberg Trials 2.0 and hold people accountable. And I was talking to him. He was going to come across and visit me where I am here in Mexico. And the next thing, I couldn't get in touch with him, and I'm like, this seems strange. And next minute, he just went to pick his passport up from the German consulate in Tijuana. And next minute, they've got him arrested. They've got him on a plane. They've deported him. They've taken him to Germany. And he's been in jail ever since. Now, this is somebody that was making progress and pushing. How far are these people prepared to go to stop people like us?
oh, they're prepared to go. What
Yeah,
we've got to really come to terms with is silence isn't going to stop them. It's only make them powerful. Compliance isn't going to stop them. It's going to make them more powerful,
yeah,
right? Being scared of them isn't going to stop them. It's only going to make them more powerful. Shutting up isn't going to stop them. Nothing, nothing on the I'll just do what they want and hope to escape the net. No, anyone who wants this power grab is going for broke. And you know what? Like, um, the analogy is that when Russia in World War II fought the Germans, they fought knowing they weren't going to take prisoners,
yeah,
right? Right? So
yeah,
if I said, okay, Lisa, you just be silent and let this bill go through. And well, wait, I have sent a beacon up to the world. Like, we had on day 4, 43,000 emails sent. You
wow.
think about that.
Yeah,
You think about that, right? You think about that. So no, at some point, there's going to be something, whether it's like, no, you can't stop me from having a pet and you can't make me eat a bug. Right? Like, it's going to be something absurd that you're not going to think is the thing that takes, but they inoculated all these people who died, who got infertile, who and there's the remdesivir and midazolam, and they did
yeah,
this and they did that, right? And they hauled out, Reiner fuel. Like, it's going to be, they want me to eat bugs to prevent pandemics. Are you kidding me? Right? Like, it's going to be something we don't anticipate. And so, like, uh, you're alive. The thing is, they don't make us mortal beings. God does, right? Like, we weren't born immortal on this earth.
yeah.
So if we're gonna just say, like, oh, we're gonna comply to stay as mortal as possible with them, like, I don't know. I don't know. Seems silly. So I'm gonna expose this. I hope Canada is so angry, and that our anger, just like the truckers, lights a fire around the world for the moderates, for the left, my beautiful loved left, whoever you are, listening to this as a troll, right? Imagine this life. The surge capacity, oh yeah, this availability and management of stockpiles. Here's your nudging language, including testing equipment and personal protective equipment. So here's, hey, I'm nudging you to think it's about having enough masks in the hospitals, right? Because we ran out. Oh, but that's only including. And so what are we really looking at? That relevant stockpiles. So is that your food, your gasoline? What is your relevant stockpile? And so that's the management of it. They get that. That's a command economy. And availability doesn't imply that they're going to make it available, right? That word just means availability of stockpiles. So right there, pretty yucky. Here's your censorship provision, communication of the risk to the public, right? An MP reading this is going to go, oh yeah, they're going to communicate the risk. What it means is they own the communication of the risk. They do.
Yeah.
Right? These big brains, these people who they're the only one with brains and the only ones to think, and they tell us, right? That's what that is. And that's what that is. Again, and own the communications. Everybody else has to stay good and quiet. Training for unexpected increases in, like, we'll just move on to that. They get our Ministry of Industry, right? They get the manufacturing capacity with respect in Canada with respect to any product relevant to pandemic preparedness. Well, since pandemic's not defined, it's any product, right? They nudge the MP, the simpleton or whoever he is, or the, compliant, that it's, it's a product. No, but that's not defined. So they get that as well. Here, communications capacity and infrastructure, right? So they want to own it all for electronic platforms, tools. Okay, and here's your nudging, including applications that are for contract tracing. So that could be your vaccine passports, but there's your nudging. But really, what they really get is all the communication capacity in Canada, all the infrastructure for electronic platforms and tools. So, and it's already interlinking surveillance from before. So this is your smart city. It's anything they want it to be.
Yeah.
It's such a huge, broad grant of power.
Yeah,
And
that to me says that, if they've got the communications capacity and infrastructure for electronic platforms to enable that contact tracing, that tells me that they're going to utilize social media, anything that anybody's using with the phones that they have. If they need to track somebody, they can use any means necessary to do that.
they get to own all telecom. They get to own everything that's, going up and dropping those cameras from every street light. They get to own that infrastructure. Since infrastructure is not defined, communication's not defined. Like there's no, hey, is this a violation of privacy? No, they just passed that. But it's more. It's a command economy. It's the state owning all the infrastructure. So when you have all the hardware and you have all the software and you're putting the people in to watch you, it's a total coup.
It's like they read George Orwell's 1984 and then drafted this bill.
Sure, maybe that was just a plan instead of a fiction. Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. So, they're coming for your food. And the Ministry of Industry and provincial governments, right? Provide measures too. Here's your nudging language. Reduce the risk posed by antimicrobial resistance. Okay, so, how much do they reduce that risk? Do they reduce that risk by eliminating eating pigs altogether? Right? Like, you got to think like they think.
Yeah.
You got to think like your opponent. Regulate commercial activities that can not materially contribute, but just can contribute to pandemic risk, including industrial agriculture, right? So, animal agriculture. So there's all animals, right? And they get to regulate it. The who, like we just heard, Tedros saying, yeah, what you're eating is causing climate change. Well, what you're eating is causing pandemics. Here you go, Canada. Here you go, world. You eat bugs. And if
Yeah.
you don't believe me, here's the next one. Promote commercial activities that can help reduce pandemic risk, including the production of alternative proteins. So there's your Gates goo meat, right? There's your Soylent Green, if that's what they're doing. I have no idea. And I'm being facetious, but
Yeah, no, production of alternative proteins. I mean, that's pretty clear to me what that is because we've seen such a rise in the production facilities of this, the bugs that they want to use, and it's
this
quite clear.
this is not us, deciding what we go to the store anymore, right? They're just not going to bring it in.
Yeah.
They're just not going to bring it in. This is not us deciding, well, yeah, you can't stop me from eating my steak, right? This is them just saying, oh, sorry, hun. And, they build out these bug factories in Canada. There's a huge one in London. And, I say to myself, when was the last time you ever heard somebody chasing down the guy at the superstore and saying, where's your bug aisle? Sorry, I'm plumb out of crickets. Where's your bug aisle?
And that's it. And
This is
it's been
this
proven as well that there's something called chitin or something within the
chitin. Yeah.
yeah within the bugs themselves, and humans cannot digest it. It's going to make people sick.
And right. All of this is like for our good to reduce pandemics, right? So because pandemics are bad and might, hurt you, we've got to control everything and own your life and get rid of your government and become a top-down command economy where we feed you bugs.
Yeah.
That's what they're proposing, and that's the message, everybody. To reduce something bad, we're going to do something horrific to you. How logical.
Yeah. And it's
And
amazing.
profit from.
It's amazing now that they've taken this, pre-pandemic clauses and removal of freedoms and rights of people, and they have literally pinned it to the back of sustainable development now,
Yes.
and Agenda 2030. And this is the vehicle that they're using to move this forward, to have such a broad spectrum of these quotes on what they want to do. And it's all the picture's really starting to come together now. It's almost like they're giving us the last pieces of the jigsaw to see the bigger picture.
Well, but nobody was talking about it at all in Canada till I sort of started the shout out.
Yeah.
So, it really does mean that all our collective voices matter. Because the beacon being shot out is my voice is resounding everywhere, and I hope it helps, and I'm so glad to be alive. So glad to be alive, right? So glad to help out. That's got to be the attitude, really. Um, and so here is your after consultations with relevant provincial ministers, because they really should be governing this, they get to change land use in Canada,
And the funny
right?
thing is, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, UNDRIP is basically, the United Nations are working alongside the indigenous communities to make sure they retain their land, and they're offering them all these wonderful things. And we know very well that it's just going to get to a point where these sites are just signed over to the United Nations.
Well, they're not working hard to infiltrate our provincial and federal municipal governments, and we see it's not for our own good. So why we would assume that when they're doing the same to the indigenous, which that's the United Nations term for them, and that's not really defined.
Yeah.
Our First Nation people, they have they have protections under our charter that they would give up. And, they're in business, and some of them live in cities, and some of them have property. And I note, they didn't get clean water. They didn't get that.
Yeah.
So this is about also, excuse me, in relation to disturbed habitats. So that's your agriculture too. So they're shutting down agriculture and changing land use. And I've got to get a coffee in my or a hot drink. Can I pause this at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll just pause it here and we'll be back in. Well, people won't even notice. We'll be back in a second.
Okay.
See, everyone, you didn't even notice that we'd gone. Okay, let's carry on.
Yeah, so we've got this awful, that deforestation cute and encroachment of wildlife, which Harvard tells us that's agriculture. So we've got to get rid of farming, right? So
Yeah.
we're getting rid of farming so that we don't have pandemics. It's ridiculous. This is a property grab. This is a land grab. This is communism. This is the state owning everything, and it's not even our state.
Yeah, I know. As
Um,
you said a little bit earlier, about 4 to 5 years ago, I noticed the implementation of rules and regulations that were seeking to limit what I could do on my own organic farm in Canada. And preempting what was coming down the pipeline, I sold the farm and moved out of Canada. I mean, how bad has it gotten over the past few years? Because I've not tracked it since. I mean, what's going to be the future for homesteads, hobby farms, independent producers in Canada?
Um, well, with this, they have the potential to be ratcheted back because agriculture causes pandemics. So, what a ridiculous leap of logic, hopscotch that we have to play with our quote overlords. Like the first thing is demystifying that they have any brain as an expert on this. They're not bringing in expertise; they're bringing the cover story for expropriation. This is a
Oh,
cover story for expropriation. We got to demystify that they are anything other than power hungry, aggressive actors
yeah.
who probably are at war with the people, really. That's what they are. And here's, their plan that a Canadian government has 3 readings of the House, first reading of the Senate, and we're going back on September 17th. So we're doing it all hands on deck. And
Yeah.
if you didn't think it was controlled by the government, this provision is a most ridiculous provision, and you have to be totally obtuse to just let them have this. And of course, but they have the nudging, okay, cooperative measures or agreements on disease outbreak prevention and preparedness between.
Yeah.
So on this, when you think about it, the Minister of Health or this public health office, um, my dog's upset. Okay. Could have a key cooperative measure. A measure is only an email. It's
Yeah.
a note to file. It's not a published, negotiated treaty. So they get to just have a cooperative measure all of a sudden with what? Oh, the government of Canada themselves, or foreign governments, or international organizations, including the WHO. So the WHO satellite office members can have another memo to file, giving themselves more powers, right? So it's very, yeah, this is an embedding of into our government under the guise of reducing the potential cause that may contribute to a pandemic not defined.
Yeah. And that's
And then, yeah,
even like through the last pandemic as well. You know, the language that you were talking a little bit earlier about the experts that they roll out, but it even got to the point where I was looking at news reports and they were just saying experts say. And they're not, they were never citing who it was. They were never citing any kind of paperwork. But this is the main headlines that people were reading. And it amazed me how gullible people were. Because if I went into a conversation that went against everything that people were believing, they would say, "Oh yeah, but the experts have said," and I'd say, "What experts?" "Oh well, I saw it in the newspaper. I saw it in the headlines. It was on CBC. It was this." They never say
yeah,
who the experts are,
yeah,
and they just kind of
yeah.
throw it in as if people are not going to question it. And as we always say here, you should question everything.
You have to. You have to. And yeah, that's why they spend so much money on state media, CBC state media. I think of CBC now as after the minds and brains of the judges that hold people to account.
Yeah,
And so there it is. So, every day they were like, oh geez, and oh geez. Yeah, it's the boomer plus. I think a lot of people are waking up. You just never know. I believe that the trucker convoy was actually a sort of like a CSIS or, MI6, MI5 kind of operation,
Yeah.
because they have, that problem solution thing going. And I think the Emergencies Act was supposed to come out of it, but who knows? And I think what happened was that it wasn't supposed to be so loved by Canadians, and that Canadians, showed up on it wasn't supposed to. So it's like you're playing judo with them in a sense that they're like, oh, they want to do this, and you're like, oh, but you want to make us eat bugs in Bill C293. Oh, you're on the floor, right? Or whatever it is, like what have you. So they're going to do something. They're letting in immigrants who
Yeah.
this was destabilizing us, but they're also not a trustful bunch. And
No.
a lot of them come from governments who are oppressive, and they're not a gullible bunch, right? Like, so I have a lot of Arab Christian friends, and, did they line up for the vax? I have Slovakian friends. None of their community did. So you've just got to say they're doing things that they've mapped out that also have consequences to them.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And then again, I want to point out one thing because it's utilized as the PR thing on all of our letters. So we're getting in front of it now. When we get a response, people have been forwarding them to me. And so the NDP is like, look, but we fought for this provision. So the advisory committee review of the coronavirus pandemic and kind, like, so what? So, if you take this out, put this back, take this out, put this back, like 100,000 times, I don't care. It
Yeah.
will not take anything away from the grant of power. It will not define what a pandemic is, an activity is. It will not change the omnipotent jurisdiction. It's the cover dance that we keep seeing, right? So this is their flashy region. It's their McKinsey et al. PR version of this is why, this is their, our reason for justifying this. Like, we fought for this. So the NDP, we get to support the Liberals because
Yeah.
of this. So,
I mean, would it be fair to say that people have very little representation anymore, and the politicians don't even read the bills that are presented, and that they're told what they're voting on without any resistance being dealt with? Because they have these dutiful government whips that will go in. And if some say they want to put this bill through and you're a politician that's kind of pushing back, and I'm well aware that it goes on definitely in the Houses of Parliament in England, and I'm well aware that these whips are in every government around the world. And if you're a politician that is likely not going to vote on a bill that they really need to push through, these whips tend to come. And I wouldn't
yeah.
even say coerce. I would say that usually there's blackmail involved or threats, certainly pretty aggressive in the way that they do. And if that's the case, we're voting people in to represent us within government, but governments have a very heavy-handed approach to those that don't toe the line, especially if it's within their own parties. Do you think that is a major problem that should be addressed in the future? Because how can we have representation that's fair and good on our behalf when we've got these absolute animals going in and bullying the very politicians that are meant to be in there representing us, and especially when it comes to bills that are this important?
Yeah. And my thought is, do the people who are reading these, like, maybe some of them are compromised, maybe they're being whipped. Like, until I took you through it, or Canadians through it, people weren't even, there's so much nudging language in there. You're expecting to see the word pandemic or PPE or training. You're expected to see that kind of stuff. So, I think the new strategy is the all hands on deck, telling them what they're passing. And so I'm going to be asking those who get responses to retweet the response so that
Yeah,
goes up. And we see and we say shame. We're talking about an omnipotent transfer of power, right? Over all aspects of our lives, including if we own property, if we can have agriculture that feeds us, if we have to eat bugs, all of that is being done. And so here we're worried about that. And here's your response, and keep shaming them and shaming them. Um, it's the Lord of the Rings, right? They have 1984 and we have the Lord of the Rings. We don't know who is going to come up and step up to help us because of our voice or our ideas, and what ideas are coming out. Like someone did a QR code of my one click. And some people are taking that QR code and putting it on magnets and driving around in the cars with it, right? And so, there's like last night I spoke with, First Nations from across Canada who are trying to come up with ideas, right?
yeah,
And they were definitely leading the charge on this. It wasn't me. It was the, they've stepped up.
yeah,
And that's beautiful. And you see BC Rising stepping up. And now World Council of Health tomorrow morning is going to have a press conference for, around the world, which is being disseminated. So, you know, you have to keep showing up, and there's no more defeatism. There's no more, and they're doing this and they're doing this. It's okay. Solution. Uh, we don't know what's going to crack the dam, but around the world, you've got to imagine that there's a whole bunch of people with like little tiny hammers going.
yeah.
So, how we're going to hold them to account. We can't stop hounding them. We have to explain what it is that we're seeing, that what it is we don't consent to.
Yeah.
And then that might reach the people who are doing the enforcement.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest thing, and I know we see a lot of information out there, but most the people have the power in the hand. Most people could watch this interview. Most people could have that information to hand, and depending on what they do with it, determines where we're heading and where we're going. And I do believe that the power of sharing this information and empowering other people around us with the knowledge that is hidden from us is key to moving forward. And people really need to share this information. I don't know whether many people are embarrassed or don't want to have the labeling of a conspiracy theorist or whatever it is, but people need to get over that, because what's coming down the pipeline is so dangerous to them, their health, their family, their existence moving forward. Don't worry
You know,
about don't worry about
it,
what people think of you. You've got to get this information out there and share it.
yeah. And so it's like we got to demystify all their terms, right? Hey, you're a denier. Yeah, and can we talk about climate being a Trojan horse for me eating bugs, right?
Yeah.
Right? Can we get back to me eating bugs to prevent pandemics? And you like we also, when I talked to my friend in Slovakia, one of the things he said that really was helpful in taking down the communism there was making fun of them,
Yeah.
constantly making fun of them, because when you make fun of them, then other people aren't afraid to speak up. And then the voices get to be like a cacophony, right?
Yeah.
So, oh, I'm a denier, AKA I don't want to eat crickets for you.
Yeah.
Right, right. Like that's what it is. Like you could call this Canadians don't want to eat bugs to prevent pandemics for the WHO,
Yeah.
right? That legislation.
But the
So,
one thing I'm also seeing, people, whether the voting, whether it's sports, the mindset of the masses is that they always want to be on the winning team. And with such massive overreach, would it be fair to say that the agendas that are being implemented are receiving pushback, and the very tyrants behind them are running out of time to implement these goals? And in doing so, it's waking more people up to such dastardly plans.
yeah. One of the things is always nudging the public of where the pack is. And so I like the idea of these landlets, or outfitting your car, or giving a message, or communicating in non-verbal ways, or not on social media, our presence. But I've got to head. I'm struggling with my voice, so
No,
I
it's
would like
good. But
to.
see, we'll be all right. But I mean, there's now mountains of evidence showing how the last pandemic was built on lies and deceptions. And because do you think a vast majority of the people will now refuse to accept any propaganda trying to sell anything similar in the near future?
I do my own little test when I go out shopping. Like, oh, I hope they don't bring masks back, just to see what the response is.
Yeah,
And the tellers, I'm not wearing that again. Or, and that'll be cue for me to say, well, and I don't want another vax. Oh, I got so sick, right? And I test the public constantly. And then I know everybody around us just had that conversation, right? Just had that. And what I'm seeing is a lot of new immigrants are like, no, no, right? There's a lot of no there. In their circles, they don't trust, they come from places where they don't trust governments like Canadians do. So we're materially inflating our numbers with people who don't trust our governments. So they're doing things to try to destabilize us. They think they're going to vote liberal. If we get our story out, um, no, they're not going to win. So uh, I don't know the path to victory. I don't know the path to accountability. I just know what the paths aren't: silence, compliance, fear.
yeah.
So what's the opposite of fear? Joy and hope. You really, that's yours. You bring it and you give it. That's yours. And the opposite of silence is speaking truth, right? And the opposite of compliance is like nudging the public.
Yeah.
It's
I
my
mean,
position.
how good does it feel to get this information out? I must admit, every time I do an interview or a podcast and the interview is important, it feels good because we've done our due diligence, we've got it out there. But one of the things as well that people have seen unfold over the past few years and is a major thing, let's discuss how 15-minute cities play into the agendas and certainly this Bill C293.
Well, we see the interlinking surveillance in there. We see them owning the communications infrastructure, tools, that kind of thing. That's part of the 15-minute city, or it can be envisioned as it. So that's fine. Taking people out of rural areas under the use of land use management because agriculture is bad. Agriculture is bad. And hauling them into cities. That's part of 15-minute city. So there's um, and remember, the grant of power at the end is that they can delegate to themselves additional powers, duties, and functions that the minister considers appropriate, right? So when I looked at that Harvard study, they also linked, um, you know, air pollution to pandemics. So there's your cars, there's your mobility. But I'd love to come back and delve into the 15-minute city. I have a real expert view on that if you wanted to have me back again and delve into that
Absolutely.
subject.
Yeah, it'd be really good to do just an interview just based on 15-minute cities alone, because I mean that's pretty much the elephant in the room for a lot of people. And if they can understand that they're building their own prisons, then maybe they'll start to move and do things differently. Now, for people under the World Economic Forum's promise of owning nothing and being
Yep.
happy, of course we will. Will Will we most likely see bills like this creating and assisting in what I see as being the greatest wealth transfer in global history?
So certainly it's a wealth transfer if they're taking our property. It's a wealth transfer and health transfer if they're taking what we can eat day to day. It's a health transfer. So that's wealth as well. If they're having a command economy, they're certainly having, an economy that is going to tank us. I didn't take you to a couple provisions that required massive spending, but the massive spending, inflates the dollar and destroys our purchasing power, and then as a result of that, shuts down our participation in the economy and small businesses and bankruptcies result, right? We've got to undo everything they're doing. That's what we have to do. I mean, step by step, everyone's like, how to do it? Well, yeah, once we can, it's just systematically everything the Trudeau government passed, it's got to be undone. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at huge amounts of consolidations. I mean, can we legally challenge these consolidations of corporations which have turned into monopolies? We mentioned earlier about the likes of BlackRock and Vanguard. But is there any way to challenge this in a bid to stop such ultimate control over humanity through this?
So, there's antitrust legislation to go after, monopolies. There's that ability. But then there's your own purchasing power and deciding now to only use it, right? Even if you have to spend a little bit more,
Yeah.
right, to acquire a good, to start supporting local businesses again and to work actively at doing that, right? So, if you're doing takeout at a restaurant, that restaurant's got to be not a chain. You got to find that mom and pa restaurant. You got to help them out.
Yeah.
And you're not doing Uber. You're going to walk it or hoof it or get it. And it's got to be back to links in our communities. Like when you look at Yuri Bezmenov and his work, he says the solution to everything is a return to morality,
Yeah.
which is really, really weird, right? Like people say this is spiritual, but it really is. And people sometimes they don't understand that, but my source of hope is personal to my spiritual belief, and hope is what fights fear. That gets me here to talk and continue to talk, right?
Mhm.
So he says the solution to it all is that reverses all subversion is a return to morality.
Yeah.
And that is really interesting. So
Yeah.
maybe
Hope.
that's your 10 commandments.
Yeah, definitely. Public healthcare in Canada and globally appears to be failing miserably and also by design. Do you see this as purposeful in its execution and tying in with what we're seeing to kind of grind people down slowly?
Well, there's 2 points here. It's definitely purposeful in the execution. There's an organization called TEDAS, TEHDAS, and that literally is an acronym for deaths. And that is an organization whose purpose was to figure out all the AI laws, all the laws that would have to go in throughout the EU to enable healthcare by AI, right?
Yeah.
And in that organization, it's health is then defined as 9 sectoral data spaces. So, whether or not you can run or do a push up or have a sore back or have, healthy food to eat, no, that's not health. We all get reduced to data spaces. So where we're going is that we are data to them. So when you're sick, that's a different set of data. Like it doesn't, and in that viewpoint, freedoms are freedom of get also morphed to freedom of movement of goods, freedom of movement of labor, right? Freedom of movement of data, and freedom of movement of, like, I can't remember what all their things are, but it's just the movement of stuff that the stakeholders want to move around. And
Yeah.
again, I'll tell you, that's a satanic view. A One Health is a satanic view of the world, right? Um, the Satanists, if you look them up and you look up the principles, they say we're just an animal, and in fact, but we're the worst animal, right? So what is a One Health approach? Like, it's making us equivalent with animals and plants and the ecosystem. And, oh, an animal's moving north, you better eat bugs to prevent pandemics. So that return to morality is kind of really important. And the idea that each of your viewers or listeners, you have God inside you. That's what I believe. You're precious
Oh
and
yeah,
you have a gift, and that resonates, and that's important.
yeah.
That's what I believe. And so that's part of it. So the OECD is another source of, they decide all the legislations that are impediments to where they want to go, and all the legislations that need to be enacted. And so, that's globalism at its core, where it's not the people locally deciding what's going on in their country anymore. It's, elites. And I want do you have the ability to look up Genesis 9 and share that? Because
Uh,
you're going to be,
not
I'll,
currently, no. I'm a bit of a technical fool,
okay,
to be.
I'll do it. Genesis 9.
Yeah, because I mean, what we're seeing as well, I mean, the whole thing they're facing, I mean, we've got the masses of humanity out there, but I think the biggest problem is the way that we've progressed through life. And I think, would you say, is the eradication of the middle class a key component in gaining control over the populace now?
Say that again. Yeah.
Would you say the eradication of the middle class is a key component to them gaining control?
Well, that's what the inflation does, right? That's what the carbon tax is going to do. That's what inflation does, just literally by taking away the spending power that you have to spend in the economy. So then you have everybody in the service industry unemployed. Then you have everybody who has small businesses failing. Then you have, right? It's a purposeful eradication. And then they use the policies either for the Green New Deal to make expensive energy. Again, that's going to hurt the poor more than the middle class. Expensive energy is going to go after manufacturing jobs. That's going to hurt them more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just going to hold on 1 second
Yeah,
because
yeah. No problem. Let's pop that up. Let's have a look.
yeah, I'm
And that's it. The key thing that I'm seeing with, the push on the cost of living, the rules, the regulations that are coming in, every time we get somebody new running for president or prime minister around the world, and right now we're seeing the most elections around the world at any time that we've ever seen before. But they always promise that they're going to go after the big cats and start taxing them and bring money in from that. But this whole idea of trickle down economics that they put into place doesn't do that. It stops the mom and pop shops, the people who have their own businesses, the people who do well in life, and work hard for a living. It harms them. It means they either have to work harder or, succumb to the cost of
right.
living and lower the standards of what they have. And this has been a major thing, certainly over the past 3 years that I've noticed.
So we have a problem definitely with, ULAs and the smart city and the Green New Deal imposing, tariffs if you have the wrong car, or it's really expensive to get into the city, or gas is expensive, or you go into the wrong zone and you're taxed, or what have you. So that, you are seeing that in so many different ways. Um, but so I looked up online, and if you put your Bible verses online, they can sort of change things. And there's only one thing I want to show you, if you can see.
There we go.
Um, right. Can you see 9?
No, but just read it to us and we'll
Okay.
we
If you have
trust
a Bible, go to
you.
Genesis 9, and it's called the New World Order.
Sounds familiar.
Right. So you think the first time you've heard of the New World Order was like more recent, or you saw like Bush, or you saw like it's been creeping up.
Yeah.
So when I just looked in that and I popped out at me. What is the section of the Bible that talks about the New World Order? It literally is after the big flood and huge genocide where no one else is left in the entire planet except for Noah and his family. So in the Bible, the New World Order is literally cue for the mass culling of everybody.
Yeah. And
And I was like,
it's funny that you should mention Noah as well, in respect of what we saw earlier in the writings, where they're trying to tell us, from Harvard, that the animals are now moving somewhere. They're trying to get away from something. It's, that has to go hand in hand with what that's saying as well.
so that, what they take away our ability to read that we don't go to the Bible, we don't read it, we don't sit there, we don't go there. And they've been laughing at us for like 10, 15, 20, 25, 50 years. They know what it means. The
Yeah.
New World Order, right? That they keep quoting. If they're referencing the oldest quote of the New World Order, it's post-flood, new family. So I think when they reference New World Order, if they're referring to that, they're definitely people who not only are they coming for the middle class, they're coming for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if a globalist is a global, everybody thinks the globalist wants to profit, but they're Malthusians. They're Malthusians.
Yeah, they already print the money out of thin air anyway. Money is nothing to them. It's power and control that they want. And that seems to be the key thing that they're after. And, they'll use any means and resources. And by owning everything that they do now, and wanting to own even more, it's not about financial gain. It's about power and having humanity almost as a slave class, subversive to what they want to do. And that bill certainly reiterates that in what they want to strip away from people and force them to do. They just want people to live under the jackboot of their
Yeah.
power, unfortunately.
Yeah, that bill has to be stopped by Canadians, and we have to do it in a very public way, so that we help other people around the world stop their similar legislation. I have a real bad feeling for New Zealand's plan, the way they've set it out,
Yeah.
the way they've empowered the police. And Trudeau recently amended the National Defense Act to make the Army, for the first time ever, the ability to be in charge of civil authority. So what that means is you have the Army able to assist the police for any of these uh, possible power grabs. But it's a top-down approach. The
Yeah.
person at the top is appointed from the WHO Public Health Compromised, and the plan is written by the Health Canada Minister of Health, who is compromised by the WHO. It has methods to get more power from the WHO through cooperative measures, and then it hands over land, communications, your control of the story, the narrative. They decide what research is relevant, and then it goes into expropriation of bugs in agriculture. So it's horrific. I wanted everybody to hear about it, and I'm glad you took the time to talk about it with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we look at this, structure of power and the way it unfolds, at which point do we give up on a judicial system's ability to resolve the very problems it created? And bearing in mind that they are, on the very same payroll as the politicians, and we will see mass civil unrest because of this. And is this the solution? Are the people within the judicial system part of the very problem in creating and passing these laws? And when we try and challenge them, we're challenging the very people who, authorize these to go ahead. Is it a closed shop? Will it get to a point where civil unrest might be the only solution to take down this power hub?
So, like I said before, they wouldn't go so hard about dismantling our government if they didn't fear it. And that goes with the courts as well. So
Yeah,
we don't know who is going to hear every case and decide to say they too live once. They too are important for history, and they too are going to make the stand and make justice count. So we don't know that, every individual is compromised, and we don't know that even a compromised person can't hear the call of humanity. I don't give up on they want us to give up on our institutions,
yeah,
but we bring the morality to our institutions. And so, you important cases, you find out, you're in front of the courtroom, you're in the courtroom, you're ready there. um and then they also have to hear from our thinkers. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I consider myself a thinker, on and reflecting, is that we have a rights-based society right now.
yeah,
And we're flipping that, and we're moving to a permissive-based society.
yeah,
So a permissive-based society means, your freedom is 2 feet in front of you until your QR code is red or your phone is red or you're like, and so I think our deepest thinkers are not acknowledging that. And I think our deepest thinkers aren't seeing the inversion of our society. And that's got to, it's got to get to our judges. It's got to get to our, they're comfortable, and, they get to go to their events and their lunch and learns and their whatever else. One of the things that is that they're getting the continuity as much as possible.
yeah,
So, all the MPs and everybody in power, as much as possible, they're still having the ability to go to nice restaurants and, socialize and feel like their life is important.
yeah,
And so they're not noticing the changes. Whereas the working class, the poor, the people confronting the drugs in their communities, they're noticing it. And so this expert rule isn't working on them anymore. And the only place it's working is where they're permitted to still live like a Westerner.
yeah,
They're living like a Westerner, and they're permitted to live like a Westerner. So they're not thinking, like, they have no imagination. But literally, we're right now going from a rights-based society to a permissive-based society, like CCP, um,
yeah.
like your smart city, where you have to be controlled, and someone else decides what you get to do, what you get to eat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a one world government is the aim, and obviously it's a dictatorship, an entire dictatorship over people. But when we look at, we mentioned the Nuremberg trials before, and it appears that in order to pull off again another deception of great size against citizens, we had to have complicit in the scam people like doctors, nurses, police, politicians, news organizations, school teachers, and many more. But because of what they knowingly did, certainly in the last 4 years, can these people be held accountable for the suffering they caused against those that bestowed their trust upon them? And knowing what's coming forward now, would a reprieve for them be good if they stood up, being these people who are in positions of power and authority and education and doctors and things like that, and actually said, this time round, we are not going to be complicit with these rules and regulations? What do you think it would take for those people to be forgiven for what they did? Maybe for not understanding in the last pandemic, maybe it was financially built. There's many accusations out there of what happened. But if these people stood up now and stood the ground and said, no, we're not doing this to the children, we're not doing this to patients, we're not doing this to people who are our constituents, would that make massive amounts of ground in restoring faith in those people, as well as also giving a clear signal to those that want to encroach and overreach in their power against us? And do you think that would help stop it?
So to the doctors and nurses, the structure set up completely as a power hierarchy, right? The directives come from your health minister, which
Yeah.
we're seeing came from the WHO, and then it's directives and you follow through. And people are used to, were they complicit and were they doing their jobs?
Hmm.
What I think is effective with them is to understand that the jabs for them are the point, right? Like in Canada, when everybody else could stop taking them, they couldn't. And when you look at TATAs and you see that healthcare is going to be AI, then what you see is that we don't need doctors and nurses at scale in their version. If AI healthcare and face-to-face healthcare is if AI healthcare is the norm and face-to-face healthcare is the exception, and in fact, if you look at the TATA's documents, you do not get access, even as a last resort, to face-to-face healthcare. And so what that means is the intent actually is a collapsing healthcare system. And so for them to step up is that they have to see that if they don't, they are lording over, for power, the vestiges of our healthcare system.
Yeah.
So, so that's to the doctors. I think the professional, everybody's scared, right?
Yeah,
And
they don't want to lose the jobs, is the majority of them. They've all got mortgages and BMWs to pay for.
so, yeah, you have to communicate where these guys are going and have them understand it. And so that they feel that there's nothing left to lose. That's
Yeah.
where it's at,
Yeah.
right? And otherwise, people are in the most massive denial of what's going on. And they need to be in massive denial because perhaps, facing what's going on is difficult or emotionally traumatic or whatever it is, right? But we're moving at the speed of light in terms of some of these changes. And so it's not an option to indulge in um, denialism or depression or, that's why they're making euthanasia available too.
Yeah.
In Canada, that's marching out. And what's frightening about it is you don't even have to sign for your own euthanasia.
No, that's
If
it.
you are unable, and we've seen all those, not able isn't defined. If you are not able to sign, like, what are you, indisposed? Are you sleeping? Are you under? Are you in a coma? Like, what? Who's signing?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess in terms of like, will justice be perfect? And uh, and how will we get it? And do we want this? Are we mad at this person and this person? And the resentment or the anger that we have about making certain people account, we may just have to be like generals uh, in a war and understand what are the facts on the ground
Yeah.
and what is possible and what is the goal, right? Like looking back or we are stopping what's coming forward.
Yeah.
And so part of like sometimes I see more and more stuff coming out about the past. And part of it is I wonder, are they wanting us to look back to hunt down justice like Nuremberg Prize for that area of COVID, right? Like focus on that.
Yeah.
My view is our energy has to be flipped forward and stopping what's coming,
Yeah.
right? Because that's done, it's happened. And they've got an agenda coming forward and it's moving. And so a lot of our freedom warriors, they're mad at what happened before. We're going to get an accounting, but I want to point people to what's coming up and getting a broader base to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Now, one last thing today. I spoke with Michael Yon last week, and part of our conversation was about looming famine. If we give control of our food to the unelected bureaucrats, will it be a certainty that this will unfold?
Well, the message is everywhere. Like, gardening causes climate change. Really? Me having a lettuce causes climate change, right? Like, and it's worse than agriculture. But agriculture is bad, right? Because of deforestation and anything. They are coming for the food.
Yeah.
They are coming for the food. And so I have an event 201 of climate change to expose to you. If you want to go through that, that would be it's
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that was a very key component of the precursor to the pandemic happening.
yeah. So we could devour a whole 2-hour segment on what I discovered on the event 201 of of climate change and how they're coming for food. But they're coming for food in this bill and under the guise that would prevent a pandemic. So honestly, they want to have all this control over the pandemic, right? Never once looking at gain of function research, never looking at the conflict of interest between making a pandemic profitable, right? If you make it profitable, like, show me your compensation package and I'll show you your success, right?
Yeah,
So, like, the compensation package here leads to pandemics being profitable. So, that's a component not dealt with here. The 1, 2, 3, 4 labs and their securities and what they're working on and that they sell, these. If you wanted to reduce a pandemic, how come you're not looking at those things? How come you're not looking at taking away the liability of the NGO? They shouldn't have any more they shouldn't have diplomatic immunity,
yeah,
right? Take away that card to do anything. Contracts shouldn't have gimme cards of no liability. Contracts that involve pandemics. Don't get rid of that. Quickly, you're not going to have pandemics, right? If you take away diplomatic immunity, boom,
yeah.
right? The first country that does that, boom.
Yeah, that's it. And it appears, we well know that food is our medicine. And if they want to remove the food that is our medicine and start feeding us on protein made out of bugs, people are going to get sick. And I guarantee at that point, the way that they're going to manage people getting sick from the food that they are eating is to massively increase the pharmaceutical supplies from the industry, again, bolstering and boosting their profits, but keeping people, again, in an invisible prison of being sick and being reliant on the very medications that these corporations are producing. This cycle needs to be broken. And until this cycle is broken and people realize that they should take far more responsibility for their own health rather than going to a guy in a white coat and allowing him to give a synthetic pill that only masks the symptoms and not the causes of the problem. If people can get their head around this and people can change things and start being responsible for their own health, growing their own food, eating healthily, making sure that they are getting the right supplements for whatever age they are, whether it's for growth or just the maintenance of health. This is where we need to move forward. Do you think society on a whole is to blame for the situations that we're in? Just not only because of the ignorance that has afforded them, but also for the fact that they would give their power away to so many people like doctors and corporations and politicians. Are we in a stage now where it's key and important for people to take responsibility and take their own power back to move forward in a direction that is good for the whole humanity of this planet?
So what you've got to realize is there is a psyop to say, okay, well, empires just fall. We're at that empire fall stage. Oh, it's that empire fall stage. It's time. Okay, fine. Yeah, that's another. We're giving away our power. You've given great examples of giving away our power. Great examples of giving our power away. In politics, the power idea is that you just drop your vote. That's what politics is. But in fact, politics isn't what's happening at the top. Politics is what's happening here. Politics is organizing, literally calling up your friends, getting to know your neighbors. They want us opposite, right? And so we're looking at subversion, and the subversion has been strong, right? That you go into your grocery store and you pick up those um, things on the shelf that are prepackaged, and you just take them out, and that's how you feed yourself. Or and so you don't know how to cook from scratch.
Yeah.
It is subversion, because they used to have home economics in class, right?
Yes.
Grade 7, you'd have home economics, and you'd know how to have a budget, and you'd know how to cook your food and make your food. You'd know how to have raw ingredients, put them together, and cost effectively feed your family.
Yeah.
So they do, and so no, we're not taught anything about preserving food, growing food. And so I've just started to learn how to do, and I'm amazed that anything grows out of my garden, but it does. And I've learned how to do jam and relish and pickles, and I'm not that good at it, but I thought, hey, this is something I need to teach to the kids in
Yeah.
case they need it. And so there's all these lost arts. They're not teaching the books, in Canada, like Little House on the Prairie, because that's colonialism, but all those books also taught you how to be self-reliant.
Yeah.
So, we've got to understand that we've been subverted, and the message of subversion is also what cues us to give away our power. Subversion tells us politics is the vote, instead of politics is organizing at the ground level. That's what politics is.
Absolutely.
And so, we've been subverted. And, when I think, if anyone out there doesn't know Yuri Bezmenov, they should. And when he says, and the cure is morality, it's so crazy, because he talks intensively how the KGB subverts society, and what their steps to subversion is to collapse the society. And interestingly enough, he says the first thing that they do once they're ready to take the society over is they get rid of their useful idiots. So,
Yeah.
right? Because after they come in, society is so horrific, so horrible, that the people that are used to, thinking they're in power and that they're power brokers, they don't like life, they get resentment, and they are apparently the most active against the new society, because they have the most amount of anger, because they thought it was going to be great. And so Yuri says the KGB just decided, well, we're going to subvert the society. When we take it over, we get everyone who cooperated with us. So, that's a message. Look at his stuff. It's on YouTube. You can find it. And I think that's what we've got to look at, this giveaway of personal power, is that we've been taught that. And to reclaim our power is a personal journey, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point to end on. I think people need to share the information. Don't be afraid to get it out. We said this a little bit earlier. The truth is more powerful than any lie that can be spun and propagandized by the very power elites that wish to put us under their jackboot. And right now, people need to realize they're in a fight for their lives, not only their lives, but the children and the future generations that we leave behind. And I think it's key and important that people get the message out there, find their voice, find their own power, stand in that power, and become everything that they were meant to be during this time on this planet. And it really is important for us to move forward. Lisa, it's been incredible having you on today. Is there any final words that you'd like to leave us with before we go?
I believe, I believe that, I believe that I believe that we can. I believe that we can win, and we're gonna win. And so put that in your heart, and put that as your belief system, because that's what's going to bring you to the most amount of creativity when you're coming up with the solutions to push back. And, there's so many millions of us have hope. And thank you so much for asking me to be here.
Yeah, no, and I believe we are already winning. And as we always say here on the Atlantic Underground podcast, it's a very common phrase, and most people know it now. It is to believe nothing and question everything. And that's a great way to end. And we look forward to speaking to you again on subjects of the smart cities and other things that are going on in the world that people really do need to be aware of. Thanks again, Lisa. It's been an absolute
Okay,
incredible
take care.
interview.
Yeah.
We'll get this out there, and
Yeah.
people, get this shared. This is important for you, your family, your friends, and everyone you care about. Find your voice. Don't be weak. Speak out. And soon you'll realize the real strength that you do have. Thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.